Main event of the evening.
Hello and welcome to These Days Are Ours, a Happy Days podcast. I'm Peter.
And I'm Joe.
And today we are discussing the final episode of Season 10, Affairs of the Heart.
Okay, Peter, tell us what happens in Affairs of the Heart.
Howard and Marion enter the house with a fan. Marion wants to just get an air conditioner like their neighbors, but Howard insists he won't until February, when they're on sale.
That's true, Howard, but in February you always say, well, it's 20 degrees out. What do we need an air conditioner for?
Casey comes downstairs with the invitations to her party, which Howard promised her in exchange for straight A's. It'll be Hawaiian-themed. That way they can hold it in the backyard with tiki torches and Howard can keep the kids out of the house. Jenny arrives with her suitcases, carried by Dawn, a pleasant, boring boy with a crush on her.
So why don't you be a dear, run to the car and get the rest of the bags?
Anything for you, Jenny.
She's staying at the Cunningham house while her parents are out of town, much to Howard's consternation. Her parents would rather not leave her alone. The last time they did that, she got that congressman in trouble. She and Casey go upstairs, and then Fonzie brings Howard and Marion outside to show them the marks he's made for a backyard pool.
Is this a dream come true, or what?
And I thought it would never happen.
He'll pay for half, and Howard can pay for the other half. Howard still doesn't want to do it. Not even for Eric Sandler, the former Olympic swimmer who's now working for his father's pool and septic tank installation company. Casey and Jenny come outside, and both take an interest in Eric. Eric remembers Jenny from the tryouts. She kept offering to shave the guys' bodies. Jenny pushes Casey to go inside and get something cold for Eric.
She really doesn't have to go to all that trouble.
She lives for it.
While Jenny uses heat stroke as an excuse to faint in Eric's arms. A week later, Jenny and Eric have been dating for a week, and she brings him to Arnold's to show him off, though he leaves to tend to a pool with an algae problem. Jenny gloats to her cousin Carla, showing off the key to his house that Eric gave her.
Holiday Inn finally gave you a master key.
Dawn asks Jenny to Casey's party, but Jenny turns him down, none too nicely.
Don, dear, find another woman. Someone more conventional, someone more your own speed. Well, like KC, or a nun.
Casey asks if Jenny is worried about burning her bridges, but Jenny isn't, now that she has Eric. The next day, Eric brings a paper bag for Jenny, which Casey takes. But it's not a present, it's his laundry. He reveals to Casey that Jenny's cleaning his apartment, which she offered to do for free, and he sure hopes Jenny doesn't get too hung up on him. Casey asks Fonzie for advice, but he's unhelpful.
We've all been down this road with Jenny before, and believe me, it is a dead end.
Casey talks to Jenny about the chores she's doing and whether it's worth it. Jenny is sure it will, when everyone at the party is watching Jenny jealously. Eric arrives for his laundry, and also to talk to Jenny about the rumors about them, making it hard for Eric to date. He doesn't want to go to the party with Jenny, despite her begging, and offering to weather strip his windows. He tells her he's not interested in her as a woman.
I don't respond to desperate women.
But I'm not desperate!
He asks if she can put his laundry on hangers, and leaves after she refuses. Jenny tears apart the sweater Eric left behind, then begs Casey to cancel her party. That night at the party, Jenny refuses to leave the house and is frantically calling boys to offer $5 to pretend to be madly in love with her.
What do you mean, 75? No way, Buster!
Casey tries to coax her outside to join the festivities, but no luck. Dawn comes in to get Casey, and Jenny tries to rope him into being her date, even begging him to ditch his actual date, but he's not interested.
But I realized that somebody who cared about me wouldn't treat me the way you did.
Along with Jenny, Casey tries to cheer her up with put on a happy face. This only annoys Jenny, so Casey gets Fonzie to go talk to her. Jenny tries to get him to be her date, and when that doesn't work, wallows in self-loathing.
If you're checking for coins between the cushions there, forget it. I already checked it out.
No guy will ever want her, except, as Fonzie points out, Dawn, before she pushed him away in favor of Eric, who treated her like crap, but at least people's heads turned when they were together. Fonzie reminds her that self-respect comes from within, and she can stay in here alone, or go outside and show everyone she doesn't mind being herself. Jenny chooses to go and join the party.
All by myself. If I have any luck, this sucker will break up early.
Thank you, Peter. That was Affairs of the Heart. It first aired back on March 22nd, 1983. Happy Days was followed by a rerun of Laverne and Shirley that night. The long-running spinoff, once the top-rated show on TV, aired just 2 more episodes before quietly expiring on May 10th, 1983.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, Schlemiel, Schlemazel, Hasenkamp Incorporated.
CBS had a new episode of Ace Crawford, Private Eye. In this installment, Ace is hired by a mud wrestler named Dee Dee.
Dee Dee Mega Doo-Doo.
To bring down her mobster boyfriend, Bull Bates. And NBC kicked both their butts with a new episode of The A-Team. in which the heroes crash land in the wilderness and are attacked by fanatical mountain men. So, Peter, of those three choices, what are you watching?
There's no way I'm not watching the A-Team. There's no way I'm not watching the team go up against fanatical mountain men in the wilderness. Oh my god.
ABC and CBS didn't even have a prayer that night. They shouldn't have aired anything. Happy Days ended the 1982-83 season in 28th place, tied with Little House, A New Beginning. Affairs of the Heart was directed by Jerry Paris, and it was written by Nancy Steen and Neil Thompson. Their last episode was Such a Nice Girl. As for guest stars this week, let's start with Larry Poindexter as Eric Sandler.
Sandler, plumbing, pools, and septic tanks?
Larry is a very busy actor from Dallas, Texas, who was near the beginning of a long career in TV and film when he did this episode. His TV credits are extensive. You could have seen him on
Friends, Criminal Minds, The Mentalist, Californication, Curb Your Enthusiasm, Weeds, Alf, Masters of Sex.
And all those crime shows with abbreviations for titles like JAG, CSI, NCIS, all that stuff. His movies include 17 Again, Going Berserk, Material Girls, Invaders from Mars, and many more. He also co-wrote a stage musical called The Devil You Know. Peter, what did you think of Larry Poindexter as Eric Sandler?
I think he walks a difficult tightrope of how much of an asshole he is. I guess it all comes down to the fact of whether you think that he's taking advantage of Jenny by letting her do all of his chores in exchange for letting people think that they are in a relationship, and how warranted you think that is. Because on the one hand, yes, that is what Jenny is looking for. At this point, she's not even DTF. She just wants people to think that she has a desirable partner. So I guess it just all comes down to whether you think he was in the right to not even just pretend to go to the party with Jenny and let people think that they were together. On the other hand, the fact that he asks her to put his laundry on hangers right after he breaks her heart, I think that tips it over into, yeah, he's just a dick.
Larry Poindexter portrays this manipulative and selfish character very well.
I'd say he does it in a nicely understated way. You get the sense that Eric doesn't think of himself as manipulative and selfish.
That was one of the things that I enjoyed about this episode, is that the Eric Sandler character is not overdone. There could have been a way to play this character and write this character as a grotesque monster, but they don't do that at all. He is self-absorbed and selfish, but they don't exaggerate him to the point of being a cartoon character. We also have Michael Morgan as Don Kitchell.
Hey girls, you're missing all the fun. Mrs. Cunningham sees never won the hula.
Michael was an actor from LA who appeared frequently on TV from the 1970s to the 1990s. Besides Happy Days, he turned up on Murder, She Wrote, Little House on the Prairie, Chips, The Rockford Files, Emergency, Lou Grant, The Courtship of Eddie's Father, and a couple of popular miniseries, Rich Man, Poor Man, and Roots, The Next Generations. Sadly, he died in 1999. He was just 39 years old. Peter, what did you think of Michael Morgan as Don Kitchell?
I think that much like Eric, he's also not too exaggerated, which shows some nice restraint on the part of Happy Days. He's not an exaggerated nerd like the Belvins. He's just a normal, slightly dorky guy who has a crush on Jenny, and after she breaks his heart, he also proves that he has self-respect, and he doesn't come calling when she snaps her fingers.
I appreciated Michael Morgan's realistic performance in this episode as well. There would have been a way to turn this guy into a complete loser or a klutzy nerd, but the writers show restraint and the actor shows restraint, and I really appreciated that in an episode like this. It makes it more relatable, more believable. We also have Candace Silvers, the real-life sister of Kathy Silvers. She returns as Jenny's cousin Carla.
Why, Carla! What a truly unexpected surprise.
Why, Jen? Didn't you think the cab you sent for me would show up?
We last saw her in home movies. Peter, what did you think of the return of Candace Silvers as Carla?
I was glad to see her back. She didn't get a ton to do, but it was fun once again seeing Jenny battle with her.
This is a fun character. She's only on for a few minutes, but it was a nice callback to an episode that I also liked, Home Movies. This is the end of the line for Crystal Bernard and Billy Warlock. Neither is still in show business today. Crystal hasn't been seen on screen since playing the lead in Grave Misconduct in 2008.
So, what are you working on next?
I haven't decided, but I was thinking something non-genre, maybe a historical romance.
From what I understand, she got married and now lives a very private life away from Hollywood. As for Billy, he quit acting after a run on One Life to Live in 2010. He's now a ski instructor in Colorado.
Just a few safety things to keep in mind. First of all, look straight ahead when you ski. If you look down, you're going to fall. You're going to have a bad time.
Peter, any final thoughts on Crystal Bernard and Billy Warlock?
This is a pretty typical episode, and Crystal Bernard doesn't really get a ton to do. She gets a decent amount to do in this episode, but this isn't really a great send-off for her, and it's even less of a send-off send-off for Billy Warlock, who gets a few lines and that's it. But he also gets to wear his crop top again, so that's fun.
Where's the rest of your shirt?
Now that Crystal Bernard and Billy Warlock are leaving the show, do you have any final thoughts on their characters, what they contributed or failed to contribute to Happy Days?
Casey and Flip are both pretty obviously stand-ins for Joni and Chachi once they left, but also never really truly left because they kept coming back. I will say that Happy Days does a good job at making them feel somewhat distinct from their predecessors. Like, Casey is much more of a goody-goody than Joni was, and Flip has his dynamic with Roger in place of Chachi's dynamic with Fonzie, which is much more combative than Chachi's relationship with Fonzie. I will say that I feel like neither character really got to shine all that much. Maybe that would have been different if they had gotten to stay for another season. As it was, they are better and worse than I remembered, and I think that both actors did their best with their characters and what they were given.
Crystal Bernard and Billy Warlock are both given thankless jobs here, filling in for Aaron Moran and Scott Baio. I think they are relatively enjoyable. They don't make a huge impact on the show. They're pleasant enough characters. I remember really disliking Flip from years ago, but I found that my disdain for Flip was misplaced. He's an okay character. Also, he flips. That's fun.
He flips. He wears anachronistic shirts. I kind of love him for that.
As for songs this week, at Arnold's we hear One Fine Day by the Chiffons and Easier Said Than Done by the Essex. We've been hearing those all season. Crystal Bernard sings Put on a Happy Face.
Gray skies are gonna clear up. Put on a happy face.
Oh, Casey, please. I feel sick enough as it is. Don't make me nauseous.
A song written by Charles Strauss and Lee Adams for the 1960 stage musical Bye Bye Birdie, where it was famously introduced by Dick Van Dyke. Any thoughts on Crystal's performance of Put on a Happy Face?
Weird choice for your song, Casey. Weird choice.
And Henry Winkler hums a bit of Aloha Oi as he walks into the house. At least I think he is. Do you hear him humming that song?
A little bit, yeah.
I'm going to put that in the maybe column. As for cultural and historical references, Howard says he is going to get tiki torches for Casey's Hawaiian-themed party. The term tiki comes from Maori mythology and refers to the first human being ever represented by a pendant called hek tiki. So-called tiki culture, a campy and commercialized version of Pacific Island life, became very popular in America in the middle decades of the 20th century. I believe we've talked about tiki culture on the show.
Yeah, it's very colonialism chic.
Is it completely gone in 2023? Are there any remnants? I think there are, because you can still get tiki torches at Party City and places like that.
Yeah, you can still get tiki torches at like Party City. You can still go to the tiki room at Disney World and or Disneyland. I forget which one.
All the birds sing word and the flowers croon in the tiki, 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 tiki room.
It's still kind of a thing. I guess people try to be more sensitive about it, but at the same time, there's only so much you can do.
Marion says that Howard whistled like one of the seven dwarfs on their way to work.
Sounds like one of the seven dwarfs on his way to work.
In the 1937 Disney animated film Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, the dwarfs whistle on their way to and from work during the song Hi Ho. There's also a song called Whistle While You Work in the movie, but it's sung by Snow White. The vocabulary word that Casey uses to stump Jenny is sequentiality.
You see, I'm studying 10 days to a more powerful vocabulary, and I don't want to interrupt the,
Sequentiality?
Meaning the linear succession of elements or events. Have you ever used sequentiality in a sentence?
I have not, no.
I may have used it in a paper in college. I don't know, if I was feeling especially pretentious. We get another classic Fonzie malapropism this week, a wrinkle in the ointment.
Yeah, well, there's just a little wrinkle in the ointment there, a little snag.
He probably means a fly in the ointment, an expression that actually goes back to the biblical book of Ecclesiastes. Originally, there is an actual fly in actual ointment.
And then people were like, wow, that's a great metaphor.
According to Jenny, at the 1960 Olympic trials, Eric swam the 100-meter freestyle in 56.5.
60 Olympic trials, 100-meter freestyle, and 56.5.
That's good, but it's not good enough for an Olympic medal. At the 1960 Olympics in Rome, the winning time for this event was 55.2. Second place was also 55.2. Third place was 55.4. So 56.5 sounds impressive, but he would have been way out of the running. Flip says, sure, and John Wayne rides side saddle.
Sure, John Wayne rides side saddle.
John Wayne appeared in dozens of Westerns, perhaps over 100 between the 1930s and the 1970s, starting with The Big Trail in 1930 and ending with The Shootist opposite Ron Howard in 1976. He spent plenty of time in the saddle, but he never rode side saddle, which was mainly for women wearing skirts. That's why you would ride side saddle, is if you're wearing a skirt or dress. Jenny says, when you've got the Hope Diamond, you don't hide it in your bra.
Sweetheart, when you've got the Hope Diamond, you don't hide it in your bra.
She's referring to a very large 45.52 carat diamond discovered in the 17th century in India. It's had several owners over the years, but since 1958, it's been on permanent exhibition at the Smithsonian in Washington, D.C. Due to trace amounts of boron, it appears blue.
Big diamonds, big blue diamonds on her finger.
I don't get what the big obsession is. Yes, it's a huge diamond, but does it do anything? Not really. At the party, Howard serves Flip a wiki wiki weenie.
What is this?
That's a wiki wiki weenie.
In Hawaiian, the term wiki wiki means super fast. The name Wikipedia refers to how quickly that site is updated. I learned something from Happy Days this week. Casey's Hawaiian-themed party features a limbo contest. But here's the thing about that. Limbo originated on the island of Trinidad, off the coast of Venezuela. That's not even the right ocean.
Well, I mean, yeah, it's colonialism chic. It's about taking all of these different cultures and collapsing them on the basis of they're all the same to us because we're white.
Jenny says no one in the tri-state area will go out with her.
Just because no guy in the tri-state area will go out with me tonight.
Happy Days made a similar tri-state area joke in the first episode of this season, a woman not under the influence. When we reviewed that episode, we talked about what that term could mean in Wisconsin. It could be Wisconsin, Illinois, and Indiana, or it could be Wisconsin, Michigan, and Minnesota. I've lived in the Midwest all my life, and I've never heard anyone use the term tri-state area to refer to any place in the Midwest. Have you?
Only on television.
Other observations this week. That joke about Jenny and the congressman is pretty risque for Happy Days.
The last time she was alone, she got that congressman in trouble.
How do we know that it was a sexual incident? Maybe it was something else.
I would bet money on it being a sex joke. Just given the tone of the episode and the tone of the way the joke is said, I think it's a sex joke here. In last week's episode, the door at the back of the house led directly into the kitchen. This week, it seems to lead into a laundry room. So I still, after all this time, do not understand how the Cunningham's house works at all. You know the door in the kitchen?
Uh-huh.
Where does that go?
It goes to wherever Chuck Cunningham has been for the last 7 seasons.
Well, I gotta go to basketball practice.
Since Joni and Chachi are totally absent, despite having come back to the show last week, I'm guessing this episode was moved to the end of season 10 to act as a farewell episode for Crystal Bernard, kind of like how Ralph's Family Problem was used as a farewell for Don Most in season 7. Do you think this episode was conceived as a season finale, or do you think it was moved to the end of the season?
I absolutely don't think it was conceived as a season finale. As a season finale, it's a weird choice. I love Jenny, but it's weird to have the season finale be focused on her as a character. But then again, stranger things have happened, like how Laverne and Shirley's show finale, the last episode of the entire show, is about Carmine going to join the cast of Hair.
I thought it'd be much harder to say goodbye. You know something? That's right.
So, Peter, we have arrived at the end of season 10. I will assume that you have compiled your list of the top 5 episodes of the season.
I have.
Number 5.
Number 5 episode, a surprising choice for me. It's about Joni and Chachi, but it's also a fun little look at folk music. It's Who Gives a Hootenanny. Maybe I'm just giving it a high score because it reminds me a little bit of A Mighty Wind, and I love that movie. But it also gives us a good Fonzie character moment as he struggles with his own mortality as represented by his hatred of folk music and his desire for rock and roll to remain the dominant musical form.
Who Gives a Hootenanny just barely missed my top 5, probably because there's a lot of Chachi in it, and I can't get past that. So my number 5 is actually the episode we just reviewed, Affairs of the Heart. That may surprise you that this episode ended up in my top 5, but I like that they ended the season on a Jenny story, even though that is a strange choice. I especially liked how the episode ends with Jenny's problem not being neatly solved, but she knows she just has to fake her way through this party. And she even says to herself, maybe I'll get lucky and the party will end early. So I love the way that this episode ends up. And even the nerdy boyfriend and the jerk swimmer character are written more realistically than Happy Days tends to do. I haven't even asked, Peter, did you think this episode was any good?
I did, for all the reasons you just mentioned, even if it is a baffling and bizarre choice for your season finale. I was going to say you can't go wrong with a Jenny episode, but then I remembered Bride and Gloom. So you can go wrong with a Jenny episode, but either way, Jenny is great. This episode is good.
Number 4.
It's a Roger episode. It's an episode all about Roger suffering in his love life, in part because of one specific girl, but also because he himself has no self-respect, unlike Jenny in this episode. It's Since I Don't Have You. This time around, I have become very fond of Roger. I really like Ted McGinley as an actor, and I think that he's a lot of fun in the role of this giant dork. And even if he is a replacement for Richie, he does manage to be a very fun character nonetheless. And Since I Don't Have You is enjoyable for that reason.
Since I Don't Have You is also my number 4 episode of the season for all the reasons that you mentioned. It's a very funny showcase for Ted McGinley as Roger. Roger tries to be Mr. Perfect all the time, impeccably dressed, athletic, impeccable manners, but we know that he has this weakness in his life, and it is for the delightful Wendy Shaw. And I was so excited to have Wendy Shaw as a guest star on Happy Days, and she's so funny here as this self-absorbed woman who just uses men and moves on.
Number 3.
Number 3 is a bit more serious as an episode, but it manages to handle it pretty well and with a fairly light touch. It's All I Want for Christmas. It's the one where Fonzie tries to reunite Ashley with her parents, and while he doesn't quite succeed in this episode, he does manage to help Heather and her mother sort of start to repair their issues with Ashley's awful parents.
All I Want for Christmas missed my top 5 list, probably because it's a Christmas episode and it's been so hot here lately in Illinois.
We also get to meet Howard's awful brother, the aptly named Dick, and it's extremely fun seeing Tom Bosley just get involved in these very childish arguments with him.
Dick Cunningham is a really funny character, and I loved his interactions with Howard. It's almost a shame that Richard Paul, the character actor, didn't make multiple appearances on Happy Days, showing up once every other season or so to torment Howard. My number 3 episode is also a Fonzie and Ashley story, and it retells the saga of their first date, and it's called Nervous Romance. And the reason why this episode is on my top 5 list is because I love the parody of the snooty French restaurant, the Quail and Snail, with the condescending head waiter and Fonzie getting into a physical altercation with another customer. Nervous Romance, I thought was going to be a lazy clip show showing scenes from previous Happy Days episodes, but it's not that at all. It revisits that story from another angle and in a way that I found very amusing and ultimately touching.
Joe, you are 100% correct. And now I wish that I had ranked Nervous Romance higher for all of the reasons that you had just listed.
Number 2.
Fonzie and Roger crash on the side of a mountain in the wilderness, and they have to fend for themselves, but not really. But even so, Wild Blue Yonder, it's got a ridiculous pilot. It's got Fonzie and Roger being dumbasses. It's got them facing their own mortality for like 10 minutes before they realize they are, in fact, in no real danger. Wild Blue Yonder. It's delightful.
That is a wild episode. It did not make my top 5 list for some reason. Maybe I was delirious when I was putting this together. For my number 2 episode, I went with May the Best Man Win, a showcase for guest star Peter Scolari of Bosom Buddies. I just like the way that this ridiculous story happens in front of Fonzie, and Fonzie is dragged into this saga that is none of his business, and somehow has to solve Peter Scolari's romantic problems, and he does, I guess. Although I don't think Peter Scolari and his bride had a successful marriage after this episode.
May the Best Man Win very narrowly didn't make my top 5, and I would also like to give a shout out to Peter Scolari's monk friends, who for some reason all still dress like it's the Middle Ages. Although, maybe monks did dress like that in the 60s. That was pre-Vatican II, right?
It was, but those very medieval-looking monks were another factor in making this my number 2 episode of season 10.
Number 1.
Well, Joe, if I know you at all, you have the same number 1 as me, and it can come down to 3 words. Karate Tom Hanks. It's a little case of revenge. It's a great showcase for Tom Hanks as a crazed martial arts expert who wants revenge on Fonzie, and it's just delightful.
A Little Case of Revenge is also my number 1 episode of season 10. For me, it was not even close. This was a runaway. Tom Hanks is so good in this that I wonder if the part was written specifically for him or if it just happened to be written and he was the actor who came in to play it. But what this episode made me realize is that in a lot of ways, we take those traumatic events from early childhood and we carry them into our adult years. It's never over, Peter. I'm still mad at people from elementary school, and we carry these grudges around with us. Tom Hanks in this episode shows how that can lead you down the path to madness. He's been spending years obsessing over Fonzie, and planning his revenge, and Fonzie doesn't really even remember him at all. It's a ridiculous situation that happens in this episode, but I think it does say something true about human nature. So I'm proud to put A Little Case of Revenge as my number one episode of season 10. So, Peter, now that we've arrived at the end of the season, what are your overall thoughts on season 10 of Happy Days?
Season 10 once again shows Happy Days trying to reinvent itself. We see it with the introduction of Ashley and Heather, who inspire Fonzie to try and make a go of settling down and being pretty successful at it for Fonzie. Less successfully, we see the introduction of Casey, who is very much the Joni stand-in. She's never quite given enough to do in comparison to Joni, but at the same time, she benefits from not being bogged down in a terrible series-long romantic arc with Chachi, who is the worst. But on the other hand, she did have a terrible character-centric episode called Such a Nice Girl. I think it's fair to say that that is also your least favorite episode of season 10.
It was. I ranked all 22 episodes, and that one ranked number 22.
So I can see why Happy Days is failing compared to the juggernaut that is the A-Team. We've been with this show for 10 years now.
10 long years! 10 long years we've been together!
And it's natural that people would get a little bored with it. And it's also natural that the kids who are big fans of Happy Days and the Fonz would also gravitate towards someone newer and flashier for the 80s, like Mr. T and Howlin' Mad Murdoch and Face and Hannibal Smith. Yes, I named all of the A-Team without having to look them up.
Oh, good for you!
I would say that Happy Days' main problem in season 10 is that it is inessential. There is no compelling reason for people to tune in every week. It is admirable that they are trying to do something different with Fonzie by giving him a relationship with Ashley, rather than have him be a womanizer who is moving from girl to girl or having multiple dates every day. And in revisiting season 10, I found that I enjoyed the episodes with Ashley and Fonzie quite a bit. But ultimately, it doesn't lead to anything. As I was ranking all 22 episodes of season 10, I found that about half the season was filler. There's just a lot of middling and forgettable episodes in season 10, and that's not enough to keep a show on the air. This is the last season that Happy Days is going to get respectable ratings. That will come to a very definite end in season 11. What is Happy Days about in season 10?
I'm not going to say that it's about reinvention, but I am going to say it's about what happens when you've been doing something for years and you can't do the same thing you've been doing for all this time. So you try to go out of your comfort zone, but not too far out of your comfort zone. And for that reason, you kind of end up being a show for nobody, except when Tom Hanks shows up as a vengeful martial arts expert.
I was so grateful for Tom Hanks in A Little Case of Revenge because it seemed to energize the entire cast and crew in a way that they are often not energized during the rest of the season.
And I will add that one of the themes of A Little Case of Revenge is the degree to which Fonzie has become domesticated. Fonzie being defanged over the course of the series has very much been a thing. He was never a super hardcore character, but early on there was an undercurrent of genuine, very slight menace to him, which disappeared almost as soon as he joined the Cunninghams. And A Little Case of Revenge kind of plays with that. Like, Fonzie hypothetically could kick Tom Hanks' ass, but he doesn't want to. At this point, he's a very satisfied house cat now, and he doesn't want to fight anymore.
That's an overarching theme of season 10, is just how soft and domesticated Fonzie has become. One thing that I do like is that he keeps in touch with one of his old Falcon friends, Rocky Barufi. That's a fun little runner through season 10. Overall, there's a handful of episodes that I think people should watch, but most of season 10 is pretty skippable. I don't know whether to be bearish or bullish on the future of Happy Days. I know ratings-wise, things are going to take a very definite nosedive next year, largely because of some programming mistakes that ABC is going to make, including one huge miscalculation that we will get to. But again, the best I can say about season 10 is that it is not a complete disaster.
Rave of the century.
And I think for a show in flux like this, saying it's not a complete disaster is kind of a victory. So, Peter, how can people keep up with us and find out about all the wonderful things that we are doing?
Listeners can follow us on Twitter at Fonzie Podcast, and they can follow me on Twitter at Blue Sky at peterwolfrank.bsky.social.
And they can still follow me on Twitter at Joe_A_Blevins. They can find this podcast online at thesedaysaroours.libsyn.com. And they can email us with questions, comments, and concerns at thesedaysaroourspodcast@gmail.com. So, Peter, what do we have on the docket for next week?
Next week, we start season 11 with Fonzie deciding to climb a mountain.
Touch a mountain, climb a mountain, feel a mountain.
Oh, damn it.
In Because It's There.
It sounds like Fonzie is still getting out of his comfort zone, which is exciting to hear. So see you later, alligator.
In a while, crocodile.
please. I feel sick enough as it is. Don't make me nauseous.